morning, and welcome to Morning Movie News, where, if you're a regular viewer, you know that I relish the days when I can put together an episode where I have a straight flush in terms of the three news stories. And by that I mean they all tie into a central theme. And I had one today. I had directors behaving badly, or ridiculous director stories. But I had to drop the straight flush. I couldn't go with it because I think that the Kevin Feige discussion of potential Marvel TV movie crossovers is just too big to put on the shelf. But the story that I was going to cover that I'm dropping is, of course, Vin Diesel's suggestion, or supposed suggestion, that Rob Cohen direct Fast and Furious 8. And Rob Cohen, of course, directed the very first Fast and Furious film, so I think that there's some, closure to it coming full circle. It's organic, and, Vin Diesel always likes to talk about family, both on camera and off camera, and I'm sure that he felt that he could really, go to town with the whole family theme by bringing Rob Cohen back. But if I were Universal, and this is why I dropped the story, because it's really just so ridiculous, and I'll touch on it for just a moment. If I were Universal, I would be like, no way in hell is Rob Cohen getting anywhere near what is now $1 billion franchise. Again, as we all know, Furious 7 made $1 billion at the box office. More than $1 billion, $1.5 billion. And Rob Cohen, while he might have gotten this franchise, started, he also then went on to do Triple X, which, rightfully so, killed his career. So I appreciate that Vin Diesel wants to do something nice for Rob Cohen. I'm glad they're still buddies, but if I were Universal, I'd say he ain't going to do it on my franchise. Go produce another movie. Go put him on a Riddick movie, Vin Diesel. Go put him on, like, The Last Witch Hunter, that kind of caliber film. Let Rob Cohen prove himself yet again. I'm not going to go and give him a golden rope to climb out of a hole that he so rightly deserves to be in. So it's a ridiculous story, and the last thing I want to say about it is that I vouched for Vin Diesel the other day when we talked about them having trouble finding a director for Fast and Furious 8. And I said, everybody's ragging on Vin Diesel, saying he's a threat to the franchise, he's too opinionated, and his ideas are bad. And I said, but look at how well the franchise has turned out. So clearly, Vin Diesel is contributing something. But then he goes and opens his mouth and proves all the naysayers right, that he does need to be managed, and perhaps he is a complete disaster and headache for any director to deal with, and that just adds further incentive for James Wan to walk away, which of course he did. So anyway, let's go on to the news stories of the day, the ones that I picked, all right? So I have two director stories, but we're going to start out with that very interesting, news bit that Kevin Feige revealed. I wonder if Kevin Feige stores these things up. I mean, I think he's very in tune with the fandom and what the fandom is thinking, and he's also, to his credit, willing to answer and entertain any question about any movie further down the line. I mean, sometimes he's intentionally vague, but people are really going to town at the press events for this Avengers Blu-ray release. And I think perhaps he knows that he's got to do something to up the interest in the Avengers once again, because I think that a number of people, not everybody of course, I enjoyed the film and I still enjoy it, but a number of people were disappointed with Avengers Age of Ultron. So I think he's trying to, put out a bunch of carrots to get people to stick with the franchise and keep their excitement going. And I think it's mostly working. I made a whole video yesterday about a potential new Avengers lineup, which I think a lot of us are very excited about. But then you're like, that's not coming till like 2021, or 2020 when it's revealed. And that's so far away. But I guess, things do go by. Time does go by pretty quickly, and especially when you're talking about comic book movies, I guess. But we'll see. We'll see. I think it's probably a mix. It goes by quickly and just painstakingly slow. But something else that he touched upon that I wanted to talk about today in Morning Movie News was the idea of a potential crossover between the movies and the television shows, namely Netflix. And I think that the Netflix shows are opening up a very real possibility this will eventually happen, because the Netflix shows are of such high caliber. And Drew Goddard was actually just talking the other day about the reason that Netflix was such a great partnership for Marvel, because it allows them to explore characters that don't warrant the big budgets that the movies want to have and need to have to really perform at the level that they do, but to also not have to water down the stories for network TV. So Daredevil is a perfect example of that, and we'll see how Jessica Jones works out. I think the teasers, by the way, and then they're mostly international teasers, so that's why I haven't been able to review them, but I will touch on them here and say that they're a very delicate balance right now of like girl power, superheroics and cliches. They're a little cliche, so I'm curious to see if they're hoping it becomes a franchise, if the series can find its own voice. And I think I'm most curious as to how they're going to handle Jessica Jones' superpowers with the budget of a TV show. Daredevil, of course, is a lot easier, but Jessica Jones, I think, is going to be a real challenge for Netflix and Marvel, and I'm curious to see how they are able to handle it. I mean, you're seeing them do some pretty interesting things with Supergirl, which is getting a lot of comparisons to Jessica Jones because they're two femme-centric superhero shows debuting at around the same time. And I think the visual effects on Supergirl look pretty solid, I think, for network TV. So interesting to see what Netflix does in comparison. But anyway, Kevin Feige did say that he sees that a crossover inevitable considering the popularity and quality of the Netflix shows. He says what really keeps them from doing it right away is the scheduling, right? Like, oh, it takes longer to shoot a TV show than a movie, etc., etc. But come on, if you really wanted a crossover to happen, it would happen. I can't believe that the people at Marvel, who literally pull in billions of dollars with their movies, would be like, ah, damn, the schedules don't line up. He's in one city this day, the rest of them are in this city another day, or they're not shooting. Oh, well. I mean, that just seems like real evil stepmother logic, right? You're like, that's ridiculous. But I think that especially Daredevil is such high caliber quality that eventually they're going to have to maybe do something. And especially maybe if fandom starts to wane, I think this is an easy way to get people excited again about the MCU. And, but I have to say, though, that a number of people yesterday when I talked about the new potential lineup and the candidates for that lineup, many of you asked, well, what about members of the TV shows? Like not only Daredevil, but also a lot of you mentioned Daisy, aka Quake from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But if you look at my video, and I'll put a link to it in the video description and the end of this video, and it's a card annotation here as well, there's just too many movie characters to sort through that you don't need to add TV characters to the mix as well. Also, I still feel there'd be some level of making the movie seem a little bit too much like TV if you brought a TV actor or TV character into them, right? Like you're like, I watched Daredevil for free on Netflix or for $7 a month. And I get 13 hours of content. Maybe I should just wait to watch the Avengers in the same way. So I think they have enough to pull from in the movie category exclusively, and I think that if you ever see Daredevil in a Marvel movie, it'll be in a cameo. And potentially, I wouldn't be surprised if it was Matt Murdock over Daredevil with some kind of legal situation. Who knows? All right, so that's the first story of the day. And I'd be very curious to what you think of the potential crossover. Do you think it's purely fan service? In what ways would you execute a crossover between the movies and the TV at Marvel? And, what do you think of Jessica Jones so far? How does it look? All right, so let's get to those directors behaving badly. We've got two of them. Now, The Hollywood Reporter did a really good expose of the behind-the-scenes situation with Gambit, former Gambit director Rupert Wyatt, and why he'd left. I have to say, The Hollywood Reporter's investigative team is mighty impressive these days. They also did that wonderful expose about the situation with Legendary Pictures and Universal and Broke the Pacific Rim 2, indefinite delay news. And I just think they're really doing a fantastic job over there. And they have a wonderful expose. It's interesting. They're a little CNN-ish, and a lot of the stuff they run is very tabloidy as well. So they have a mix of like tabloid TMZ fodder and some real gem industry reporting. So this is the latter. So they talked about Rupert Wyatt and why Fox got rid of him, that basically they were really concerned about another Josh Trank situation. And also they felt there was a real lack of enthusiasm with Rupert Wyatt. And also, Rupert Wyatt apparently is a serial quitter in Hollywood, and that he was supposed to be on The Equalizer, he's supposed to have done some other films, and also that he tried twice to do Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, but both times he quit because of a problem with his, the resolution with the studio. So basically, as they so eloquently put it in The Hollywood Reporter, when you're making a movie for like $100 million or around that in terms of the budget, the studio wants to have some say as to how the movie turns out. Because, it's their money, it's their investment. And we talked about production companies' relationship with studios just yesterday. So this actually adds a little bit more light to that. So obviously, since they're paying for it, they get to have some say, and they can veto certain things. And apparently Rupert Wyatt is so worried about making a dud that he doesn't want to be in any film which does not totally go with his artistic vision, which is impossible in big-budget Hollywood movie making. And also, I would have to say to Rupert Wyatt, if I was going to be totally honest with him, and I'm going to be right now, his artistic vision obviously was allowed to flourish in The Gambler with Mark Wahlberg, and it was literally one of the worst movies I ever saw. It was so bad that it inspired me to, for the first time, to make a top worst movies of that year video, which I usually never do because I don't like to rag on movies to that extent, right? Potentially because, hey, you know what? Movies are art, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and that's why I focus so much on box office numbers, because that's really the only definitive way to talk about whether or not a movie is successful, right? But there was no argument, in my opinion, as to whether or not the Gambler was a total hot mess. And it was just one of the worst movies ever made, and I think that if that's Rupert Wyatt's vision, maybe he needs a little assistance. But anyway, apparently he was having problems with Fox in terms of the artistic vision for Gambit. And they couldn't really reconcile on the direction they wanted it to go in, and Fox was getting awfully nervous that he was going to hijack the movie and make it a mess like Josh Trank did. So they kind of were like, maybe you should quit. And Rupert Wyatt was like, maybe you're right. Now his agent very boldly tried to defend him, and he said, look, maybe if Josh Trank had quit, we wouldn't have had the debacle that was Fantastic Four. I think it takes an experienced and disciplined director to walk off a movie if he feels he can't deliver. To which I would say, nice try, Brian Swardston, I believe of UTA. But if you keep walking off of every movie, who in their right mind would hire you? Because clearly you're not in it till the end, right? I mean, who wants to hire somebody who will bail at the moment it doesn't look like it's going their way, right? It's like, we don't all have that luxury. Or also even, if someone does bail, sometimes they'll kill the movie, as is the case with some of the movies that Rupert Wyatt has bailed on. So you'd like to think that your director is passionate about the film and is willing to work in a team environment to get the film to the screens, right? And there are tons of great stories. One of my favorite stories, which I've told before, is when Francis Ford Coppola, when they were like, we want to cast Robert Redford as Michael Corleone. He had an epileptic fit in the boardroom because he was like, that's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard, and I can't believe you're suggesting that. And it was ridiculous. And he just totally, instead of just walking and saying, fine, I won't make The Godfather, he had an epileptic fit right in the boardroom, showing the suits at Paramount just how bad an idea that really was, and how tortured he was, and how they were just totally, driving him crazy and up the wall. And it all worked out. He got Al Pacino, and Al Pacino became a movie star. So I think that, Hollywood's a very unique environment, and you just have to be willing to, as they said, in Jerry Maguire, ride someone's ass like Zorro so that you can get the outcome that you want and that pretty much everybody wants. Because at the end of the day, everybody wants to make money, so you should be working toward that. So I think Rupert Wyatt, after this article, good luck getting a gig on a major motion picture. Maybe on something small, but he's going to have to prove himself again. I certainly wouldn't hire him because I don't need someone who's not fully committed to a production and is looking out for themselves instead of the movie that they're working on. All right, so that's the second story of the day, and I'm very curious to how you feel about that news, that development, and I hope that Gambit can make its release date. A lot of you don't believe in Gambit. I believe in Gambit. I think Gambit could be a very good movie. I think Channing Tatum is well cast, and I'm surprised it's so hard for them to find a director, because Channing Tatum, I got the chance to do a press conference with him, and I got to ask a question and see him field all the questions. And I have to say, I thought his business sense was really solid. And I think anyone who sat down with Channing Tatum to discuss a potential film that Channing Tatum had some say in creatively, and he is very heavily involved in Gambit, beyond just being an actor, they would be impressed and want to work with him. All right, so anyway, Steven Soderbergh did, right? All right, so let's move on to the third story of the day. And that's Genndy Tartakovsky, who sat down with the Wrap and basically crapped all over the Hotel Transylvania franchise, which I thought really took a lot of guts and I think poor judgment. So basically he was like, yes, I'm so happy that Hotel Transylvania did well. And he talked about the film having a much lower budget and also some creative differences with Adam Sandler. And he, very, very thinly veiled, probably sound like a contentious situation between what Genndy wanted and what Adam wanted. But I always find it amazing that someone would, talk about any discord on a set when a movie does well, right? When a movie does well, everybody should hug and be like, this is wonderful. This is going to help all of our careers. I'm so happy. And you know what? We fought, but it was worth it. Look at the results, right? But, not Genndy. So he kind of called out Adam Sandler for being difficult, although I think that clearly Adam Sandler won most of their battles, and the movie did well at the box office. So I don't really know. I think this is one of those rare situations lately where Adam Sandler comes out looking a little bit better. But Genndy Tartakovsky straight out said, I'm not returning for Hotel Transylvania 3. I have other movies that I want to make, other stories that I want to tell, and that's what I need to do. And I would say, hey, that's great, and you should go and try and make those films, but I see no reason that you can't try and do both, right? Or stay on board as a producer, right? At least keep a toe in the Hotel Transylvania waters for creative input from as far as the fans are concerned, and from a business standpoint to make sure that sucker stays on your resume. Because it's important to have hits on your resume. So, and I think Hotel Transylvania 3, and I made several suggestions as to what I think they should do for the third film in a video on Monday. I think that if they, I said that the franchise is so well constructed that if you let it write itself, it will. And so if they just let it go, I think they could have a huge hit on their hands with the third installment. That could gross even higher than the second installment, which outgrossed the first installment its opening weekend. But anyway, not for Genndy. Genndy doesn't want any part of that. But I would caution him that, I think that Sony sure as heck isn't going to make those other animated movies that he wants to tell, because he's bailing on their franchise, publicly, by the way, not even behind closed doors. So until he had another deal in place to go and make another animated movie, I probably wouldn't have said this. But we'll see. Maybe it'll work out. I think that Genndy Tartakovsky did fantastic work on the first Hotel Transylvania. And I said I thought he kind of phoned it in on the second one. And I'm curious to see. He's also really still upset about the Popeye situation. But I have to say, I don't really think that Popeye would have made any money at the box office. I think that people would have liked it who are diehard Popeye fans like Genndy. But I think that from a financial standpoint, I don't really know how it would have done in that regard. All right, so those are the three stories of the day. I'm very curious. Do you think Hotel Transylvania, the franchise, needs Genndy as much as Genndy needs Hotel Transylvania? And if you were Genndy, would you have been so frank in your interview with the industry trade, which all the industry people are going to read, right after your movie opened at #1 and did extremely well and broke box office records? All right, so those are the three stories of the day. Now I have a viewer question from a longtime BTT viewer, Anadi Mishra. And Anadi says, I'm very happy to get to your question. I love that you guys have your avatars now in the YouTube comments, because I know some of you quite well, and Anadi, you are one of those people. So Anadi says, question, hello Grace. Very, very long time viewer since review days. I know Anadi, and I appreciate it. And Anadi says, although I have asked this question before with no response, I'm trying my luck again. Thank you for trying again, and today is the day I'm answering it. So Anadi says, how do limited released movies get to achieve per-screen averages that at times are 10 times to 15 times more than summer blockbusters? Like, for instance, the Grand Budapest Hotel had a 200,000 per theater average, even though these movies are played at smaller screens with much less frequent shows. Whereas wide-release movies get in the range of 10 to 15K, and for movies that do exceptionally well, like Jurassic World and Avengers, where the theaters are jam-packed, it's below 50,000 per theater average. So thank you so much, smiley face. Very interesting question. Yes, for instance, we have been talking about Sicario a lot lately, right? That's been delivering 65,000 per theater average, 35,000 per theater average when it went a little wider. But Grand Budapest Hotel, as I noted, had an astounding per theater average, one of the highest of all time, like around 200K. So how does this happen? Well, when they release a movie in thousands of theaters, and these big blockbusters are released like in 4,000 theaters, 350,000 plus, believe it or not, there are parts of the country where they don't sell out, right? Particularly at all the showtimes, right? Like that early morning 9 a.m. showtime, right? Not going to be that crowded. They're going to sell very well in the evening, particularly in the big movie-going cities, which are New York, Los Angeles, Atlanta, Boston sometimes can do very well. You see Chicago, can do very, very well. In addition, sometimes Florida gets on the map. But that's really actually it. That's where the bulk of the movie going comes from. Actually, the top 3 cities, believe it or not, are New York, Los Angeles, and Atlanta. That's where all the money usually comes from when it comes to movies. Very rarely does any other theater in the country get into the top 10 grossing theaters, which I think is fascinating. So when you have a movie play, like let's say in Idaho or Mississippi or Louisiana, other places in the country, basically the term for it is middle America, they don't do as well as they do in the cities. Where I think a lot of you, or a number of you, at least many of you who comment things like this, you live in movie-heavy going cities. So to you, the idea of a movie like Avengers opening or Jurassic World opening and not being sold out is very foreign to you. You think that's ridiculous. But believe me, there are places in the country where that happens, where it doesn't sell out, Or maybe like just the Saturday and Friday night showings sell out. It doesn't do that well, in the morning shows or Sunday, it starts to peter out a little bit. That's just the way it is, because those are places in the country where people don't go to the movies every weekend. In fact, there was a recent survey which we discussed recently, I'd say maybe a few months ago, where most people in this country, a vast majority, don't even go to the movies at all in a year. Not once. They do everything on demand or streaming, if at all. They just don't partake in what Hollywood has to offer in terms of movies. Now, some people will go to a movie once a year or once a month, right? Or every other month. It's just, it's hard for us movie lovers to believe, but some people just simply don't have a desire to go to a movie not just once a weekend, but even once a month or even once a year. So that's why the averages are so low for a movie that has cast a wide net in terms of box office. Now, it still makes a lot of money because because the net is so wide and people do go, even though it isn't sold out, to all those 4,000 theaters. But when you have something like Grand Budapest Hotel, that opened in just like 4 theaters, right? 4 theaters in the entire country. And that's why a movie will often open in just New York and LA, because that's where people go to the movies the most. So you have New York and Los Angeles, and Grand Budapest Hotel opened in 2 theaters each. 2 in New York, 2 in Los Angeles. And because it's only playing in 2 theaters, and the New York and LA audiences are so movie-centric, and very Wes Anderson Grand Budapest Hotel centric, that was a very big, hotly anticipated awards contender. They just all rush in to see it as soon as it opens. So you have sold out showings all day long in just those 4 theaters. And they play them, and because there's such demand, they play them in very big theaters, which have huge capacity, right? Some theaters in New York can hold a ton of people, whereas there are some theaters in the rest of the country that are smaller and don't hold as many people. So that also brings the average down, right? But you have the biggest theaters in New York carrying the Grand Budapest Hotel and selling out every single show. And that's how you get those kind of per theater averages. So that gives you a little bit of insight into release schedules and strategy and how certain numbers are able to be posted in some situations and not in others. So thank you for your question, Anadi. I hope it was worth the wait. I hope you'll continue to ask questions. That was a great one. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and that viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.